Welcome back. Let's see what we were doing. Let's jump in and test it out. I want to say that we were just, yeah. Okay, so we're able to go into combat now, but we can't really do much else. We also have some animation issues there. I think it ends too early. And then once we get out of the ring, we're good. Just got tap to move, and we can jump. Whenever you leave a ledge. So yeah. That's about it. So, what are we going to do today? I'm going to try and keep this one a little bit shorter. Last one was like 4 hours long. I'm thinking we could probably do fix the animations for swinging attacks and a few things like that. I don't think we're going to do any AI stuff yet. Okay. Yeah. So let's think about this. First, I think the biggest problem is our camera. So camera, you can't see what it is you're attacking or what you're doing, especially because the character's just in the way. So like you doing like eventually when you do like a single tap, it'll be like a stab. We can't really do that with our character in the way because you're basically just clicking on your character. And maybe we want to keep that like tapping on your character is how you block or something like that. So Zelda, they let their camera kind of meander a little bit to one side or the other. Sometimes they think a little bit too much for our kind of taste. I think it works for them, but when you're doing like the swipes, you kind of need to orient what you're swiping at. So like what was it, like Wind Waker? You might get your camera kind of way off to the side here. Let's see, like something like this at times, where it's kind of up and to the left or to the right. And it kind of sits here. And if we're doing swiping, like the further away we get like this way, then it starts to get confusing to the player about which way they're swiping versus which way their character will swipe. So we always want to have like a limit on this, but I'm thinking we do need like a kind of offset to make sure we can see who we're fighting and still be able to see our character. So you can do like I'm thinking like a rule of thirds kind of idea where our character will sit on this line over here. Kind of pull the camera back a little bit, maybe lift it up from where it originally is, and then whenever we leave combat, we kind of go back into this kind of centered movement stuff. Because having this centered kind of thing is still nice and beneficial. But once you're in combat, it's not. It just kind of gets in the way. All right, so let's do that first. Camera stuff. Player, character. Okay. Let's just take the action swipe stuff down for a minute. So we're going to take a look at a couple things. One is for this touch look, I'm just going to throw these into collapsed graphs because I already see them sticking out and it bothers me. Just to keep everything more condensed. As long as you can find all this stuff, it's fine. As soon as it starts getting too condensed, then it's not as good, but this one is for doing what do we want to call it? This is our touch look, and the other one's to stop looking around. So I'm just gonna put this in. Okay, so we got an enter and we got an exit for looking around. That's good. Now, I'm thinking about the camera. Ultimately, we want to make a system that's kind of flexible. Some of the camera stuff we will be putting into like the camera manager, and it's what do you want to call it? Like the I'm trying to remember what it's called now. It's the modifiers, camera modifier stuff. We'll be doing some of those, but when we want to control the arm and things like that, what I'm thinking is that we may want to create states and like be able to just tell based on those states, like in combat or out of combat, where the cameras kind of default to, you know, arm length wise and FOV wise and all that kind of stuff. And then we can control it based on timeline. Because if we try and do it in like the update, it'll get kind of busy pretty quickly. Where we're just constantly like trying to check what state we're in and then to do like updates there. Instead, we're just gonna, every time we do a state change or something like that, we'll just say, hey, set the camera to this, and it takes this amount of time to get there. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Right now, we have a distance of 300 and an offset of 50. It's kind of just standard, kind of Unreal stuff. Around 300, I think, is the default for the arm length. And for us right now, this isn't bad. I think it's okay. But as we get into that combat, yeah, we do have to shift it back a little bit and then up a little bit and to the left or right a little bit. Typically, in like a Zelda game, it'll also switch sides or be able to switch sides. I think we'll get to that later. I think right now we'll just do it to the left side or the right side, and we'll worry about the switching later. So what do we need to do? Well, we're entering combat state here, and then we can call two functions when we enter and when we leave. Or not functions, a single function that will just set our camera variables to something, and it'll lerp to those variables, the linear interpolation stuff. We'll use the timeline to make the curve. So let's do that. Let's do two custom events. Or actually just one, technically. Perform camera transition. We'll call it that. I think that's good. And we are going to be doing, we're going to need a couple variables for this. We have to keep track of wherever the camera currently is, like what state it's in. Because we don't want to snap to a hard-coded start. We always want the camera transition to start wherever the camera currently is. So a good example is like if you're going in between this combat zone and the camera isn't fully transitioned yet and you back out, you don't want it to snap to the front and be really jarring and then pull back out to the non-combat version. So we always have to keep track of a start and an end. So I think that what we'll do is say, hey, when we're doing this transition, we're going to set the end to whatever variables we put into this, wherever we're calling it from. And then we will set the start of that lerp to wherever the camera is currently, whatever its variables currently are. So I know that's kind of a lot, but let's do, I need a float. So we need to do camera arm length, we need to do the socket offset, and we need to do field of view and the amount of time it's going to take for this transition to happen, right? So we're going to do arm length, do a vector for the socket offset. We're going to do a field of view, and we're going to do a time. So Okay, so we have length, socket, field of view. Just to get rid of that weird. Okay, so it doesn't separate the letters there for field of view. Okay, so we are going to set some variables, and we're going to keep track of them. Although we could, in theory, just set our start to whatever. Well, no, we can't. We have to set it to whatever our camera currently is, because it could be in between. Yeah. All right. So promote. We're going to promote, and promote. Although it's time, I don't know if I have to promote the time yet. Time I might be able to get away with just a setting here. So let's delete that one. See if we can do that. So we have pulse camera, arm length, desired. So we have desired for arm length, socket, and field of view. We're going to drop these into a camera category, and then a subcategory of transition. Okay, and then we're just going to duplicate each of these, and we're going to rename them to current. Or start. Start is better because current doesn't quite mean the same thing. We could say end instead of desired. Sure, let's do it. Just because we're doing a lerp, I think it'll be better to keep track of it that way. And I'm going to keep these next to each other. Start and end, start and end, start and end. Okay, start and end, start and end, start and end. File save. We're going to set the start then to be our camera's current. Just push that one there. Okay. And then our camera goes to field of view. Let's see if we can just stack this one. Sometimes stacking is better, it just depends. It's whatever is more readable. And I'm not liking that, so it's just gonna. Okay. And we're gonna collapse to a group, which is gonna be okay. We also need a little spot for time. And that should be perfect. Okay. You still have to set up time, but everything else is good. Okay. So we have a start and an end. We need a timeline to control that lerp. So let's do that next. I always like to keep mine called timeline, just so it's easier to find. Let's do camera transition. Okay. Let's just do a switch. Well, actually, we don't need a switch because we're always only going to be going forward. It's always a play from start kind of thing. And then when we finish, we're just going to call finished. Okay, and this is just going to be a float track alpha from 0 to 1. 0, 0, 1, 1. It's going to be 1. Okay, and we're just going to give it a simple curve. We'll worry about trying to make the curve a little better later. Or if we even need to, it might be fine. Kind of how it is for now. But then we're just going to set everything. Arm length, socket, and then the camera field of view. Okay. And later we can worry about kind of putting in a few other camera things like post-processing effects or the arms kind of lag mount and things like that. Right now I'm not too worried about it. We just need to get it into a good position and feeling, nice. So we're gonna lerp. Same thing with this. And that curve in the timeline will actually give us a nice curve as opposed to using like an ease, because you could do an ease here and give it like because an ease in and out. But since we're already doing that on our transition, we don't need to do it here. The lerp will just be perfect. And then, yeah. Let's see. Okay, our alpha is going to be right here. Oops. Oh, come on. Doing poorly today. All right. So we got all that. I'm just gonna pop this up there. Because we need to add in the start and end now. So start, end. If you don't know that little trick, if you just hold down Control, you can do a quick get as opposed to like dragging it out and then saying get. I want to say Alt is the set. Yeah. So if you hold Alt and do it, it sets it. Start, end, start, end, start, end. And then we need to call the function, and we also need to set the time. The basically the play rate of our timeline. You know what? We're going to make this a little easier to read by popping it up top. Or we could just take it and do it like this. That'll be fine. Just get rid of that. Okay. Yeah, blueprints are all about trying to remain consistent, simple, and very clear. Because you can get them very, very messy very quickly. Okay, so that's there. Our time. To set the play rate, we actually just have to get the variable that controls our timeline. Which will be under components, timeline. Set play rate. Okay, And the play rate essentially is just going to be our play time, the amount of time it takes, which is going to be 1 second. And you just divide it by whatever the amount of seconds you want it to take. So if you want it to take 2 seconds, the play rate becomes 1/2. So it plays half as slowly, and since it's a second, it becomes 2 seconds. In our case, it's just whatever we're going to plug into here when we call the function. So however fast you want it or however slow you want it, just say the amount of time it'll take, and then we set the play rate. Transition. Okay. Perfect. Now, by default, I'm going to put in a few numbers to here just to make sure that everything's kind of set up with some sort of default in it, just in case. You really should be setting everything when we call this, but, I'd rather be safe. Instead of having the camera freak out when we call it to set its field of view to basically 0. Call the camera transition. So when we start and when we end, we can do this. And of course, you can kind of put variables into these. So you can say combat length and stuff. But let's just type in what we want to do right now. So we're at 300 normally. Let's go to 500 length. Let's go to 100 up. Field of view. Let's go to 95 instead of 90. And this will take 1 second. And then we'll go back to kind of the normal. But it'll take 2 seconds and kind of ease back in. And let's see if it works. There we go. So the camera's kind of pulled out. We still haven't moved it to the side or anything. We should do that. And I'm not sure if I really want to pull it like this far back, but there we go. And now as we leave, it goes back in. Our camera will transition really nicely now. And if we ever want to call a different kind of transition for whatever reason, you just call the same function. And there's some things we can do to improve on it as we go, but I guess that is fine for now. I am going to toss these into some collapsed graphs. Keep this kind of clean. All right, so we're saying don't orient to movement, and let's move our camera. Let's make some variables, and we'll kind of tweak them a little bit. It's always nice to keep these variables so that you can very quickly kind of edit and change things and try new stuff out. So I would say if you can keep track of all your variables and make sure everything's named properly, it helps a lot. Instead of having to track down this exact function. Length. Combat. So we're going to call this the same variable, just combat. Camera socket offset combat. Or just socket, since we're not using offset for the other ones. Yeah. Okay. Camera. FOV combat. Camera transition. Time combat. Well, that one's getting a little long. Let's just call this transition. Okay. Compile, and then we can go in and we can change these defaults. And I'm actually going to toss this into camera combat. Let's do a camera combat. Okay. So we're thinking that this might be a little bit too far out. Let's do 450. Let's do offset. We want to offset it to the, let's say, right. Let's do 150 for now. Field of view 95. I think that's fine. Opening up the field of view, I think, is beneficial for combat. I don't know. It depends. Some people don't like shifting field of view, but sometimes it's kind of nice to use. We'll see. Okay. Right now, we're just more interested in trying to get that offset to the right or left working real well. And then when we're in combat, like let's say we have a timer that's checking if the any reason we should like shift the the camera to the other side, then we'll just be calling the same function, but maybe we'll have like a version of this variable or something to tell it to move left or right. This one is combat, or player enter combat. Yeah, typically you'll have more descriptive things there, but for now this is fine. Okay. Same thing with this guy. This is going to be our normal camera stuff, though. Player exit combat. Yeah. And we need kind of a name for whatever our really basic state is. Like when the player's just kind of running around doing his own thing. I'm thinking that's going to be our exploration state. That's what we'll call it. So this will be camera arm explore. Or exploration. Combat, exploration, yeah. I know it's slightly longer, but it's fine. Okay. And these should all be correct in terms of they're the kind of defaults that we have set up already. Yeah. Perfect. So now with single one, we got this. And we also can technically call something after our camera finishes its transition. So if we do need to do something after the camera finishes whatever transition it's doing, then we can call that. We're not getting a socket offset. Do we do that one or do we forget? Combat, socket combat, yeah. So this 150, is that not working? Let's figure out if that's not working. Socket offset. Interesting. It should work. See why it isn't. Unless it just wasn't enough for me to see. No, that's still dead on. Let's do a couple things. One is if we eject. Let me see if I can. Typically, you can see the camera arm, like the line, but I'm not seeing it anywhere. It's interesting. I wonder if I'm being blocked by something. It shouldn't be, because the camera would be blocked then. Interesting. I feel like the Z stuff is working now. Maybe it has to be Y and not X. Is the Y is left and right, I bet, for this. Let's just check it. So you can see that arm stuff. Yeah, so that's going forward and backward. Yeah, so we want to put it in the Y, because I'm not very smart. Combat, this one here. Let's put it in the Y. Oh, wow, and we're really far back now. So being that far back still isn't good, because essentially it's pushing us forward. It's a bit too far for me, so the arm length combat 450 is too much, so we're going to do this as 350, maybe 400, or 375 maybe, somewhere in there. Just ballparking it for the time being. Still a bit too far, I think. The other issue is if I have the thumbstick here, I can't actually tap on the player if I ever want the controls to do anything like that, like blocking and whatnot. So I have to do it on the other side, or I have to, if I do want to switch it back and forth, then I have to figure out a different method for input. Let's also toss this under camera and exploration. Okay. Okay. Oh, wait, I need to change that still. So my combat socket. This is 200. And we're going to do my arm length. I wonder what will happen if I bring it in instead of take it back out. I don't think this is what I want to do, but let's just try it. Okay, it's too far up still. We're not quite on the right line. The line's going to be a little bit further in for that. So let's do 70, 50. I could always pause it and try and just move this manually for the time being to line up kind of where I want the camera to be. So we'd use eject for a second. Let's bring this on. And let's just play with the settings. Okay. 60. Let's do 200, negative 100, 65. Now I'll bring it back to 60. So it's getting closer to being on that line. Still a bit too high up almost. I could try and tilt the camera down. So that would mean that I'm not looking at like kind of the center, but instead like at the feet. Could try that. But let's make those changes. So the length, we're gonna drop this down still, or well, let's keep it a little bit higher. Let's take this and let's drop this down. And let's drop this down, all the way down to 50. For the time being, at least. And let's take a look at where I'm looking at our focus. This is looking basically at the center of whatever it is we're supposed to be focusing. Wherever his point is, essentially. Okay. Something like this isn't bad. Something you'll notice is that the character is kind of floating. This is just how the animations are typically set up. So right now I have it perfectly aligned with its collision. So if I take a look at collision, you can see that the capsule spot, basically the point it sits on, is right here. But the way that movement works in Unreal is that this kind of capsule spot is always really close to the ground, but not always exactly on it. And it's just kind of for movement purposes to make sure that it doesn't get stuck on things and stuff like that. So typically what they'll do is they'll just take the character and move it slightly down from wherever it should technically be. So instead of being exactly on there, either the animations will do this or like the just in the editor they'll do it. So I go 72 or something. It can be like 2 down. And so the feet will kind of penetrate just very slightly into the ground. Or it'll be really close. Now this is starting to get a little bit too high up, I think. So we're actually going to kind of knock this down to 65 or 64 maybe. And negative 66. Now it's getting really tight, so we're going to 6, and this will be negative 68. It's close. It might be a little bit too close now. Let's do one more. 70. Yeah. So we have a little bit of wiggle room in there. But not bad. I don't know if that matters how much room is up here. We might actually want more room eventually if it's getting in the way or anything. Let's try that, and let's also do that for this guy here. Mesh, and this guy, maybe 65, which means that this guy is 65-ish. So 66 and negative 68. Something like that. That'll be good. 2 down. Oh, whoops. Just end. Yeah. So his feet are going to penetrate just a little bit. Maybe we bring him up 1. So his feet are in the ground a bit too much. Okay. Yeah, something like that. And that's the thing, is that there's always like a unit or two in which they aren't quite matching. I mean, you could always fix it with some IK stuff, but I like getting it as close as I can, and then you can always do that later. So now, actually penetrating just enough for my character. It's kind of perfect. Alright. Camera-wise, part of the issue with pulling the camera back too far means that, you can get in between things, like the camera can have a tree between it and the player or something like that. So you want to be aware of that. I still think that right now everything's kind of at this level, so I might want to make the camera kind of be pointed more at the feet. So there's a couple of ways we can think about doing that. One is that we can essentially say we're going to hard code where it's going to look, essentially down X amount. Focus rotation, we are having pitch involved. So we can always do a little bit down if we want, just slightly, or we can actually have a point on the character that we do it. Have it return the location instead of the center spot. We get to dictate where on the character you actually are looking. or object or whatever it is, whatever target we're focusing. And that might be the better way to do it right now, because if you have a target that has very different proportions, like we have this little guy and we want to be looking more towards the ground because he only fills up a tiny bit of the screen. But then if we have like a gigantic guy, we might want the camera to look more up a little bit because we want to be able to see the character and what they're doing. So let's do that. We're going to use the blueprint interface stuff. So blueprints, characters. We're going to return focus location. Just set focus target. Location. Okay, output vector. Location. That's good. Save it out, jump into our player, into our character, and we can do an interface return. And by default, we're just going to get actor location. Because we know that this might be kind of the default for a lot of characters, we could set this up to be the feet right here just by using the capsule component kind of thing, or the mesh location kind of Z, something like that. But we could just override it in every character as well. So it's a good question. Let's keep it like this and let's override it per enemy. I think that'll, if we end up doing the same code a lot, then we'll just copy it over to that one and then clear it up from there. So we're going to override it here in our enemy. Which is going to be, what did I call it? Hold on, where is it? Here it is. This is the return focus. Let's return. Oh, it's not going to show up. Maybe I have to do it through here. I don't think you had to here. It should pop up with the interface. So typically it's not under functions, it's under interface. I wonder if you can't override interface returns like that. And so what we would have to do is like do a different function or a different thing to override it. Let's see. There has to be a way to do that. Come on. That would be odd. Wouldn't it? Yeah. This. Yeah, so here's set focus target though. Which means, yeah, here, return focus location. So it isn't here. It's just a function now. So what we're going to say is get capsule component. Or even, we could put it just from here and just get the world location of this guy. This will be slightly under the ground. And technically, if the root ever moves, though, we'll be moving with it, which isn't necessarily bad. I also could get like a pelvis bone or something and kind of go in between, which might be interesting. Like when you're kind of deciding what to do a lot of the time, like to figure out where a character is moving or what they're doing, you typically can read where their hips are facing and what they're doing, because that gives you a good indication of what the human body is trying to accomplish. Your hips have to like help when you're like throwing a ball a lot, or if you're turning to run in a certain direction, your hips usually have to turn first. So juking people out. When you commit to where you're like running to, you have to turn those hips in some direction. So that might not be a bad way to do it. So the component, let's get the mesh and let's get the hips bone. Get socket location, which will be a world location, which is perfect because that's what we need. And we're going to do hips. I'm pretty sure that the hips are going to be on this character, but let's double check the skeleton. No, it's called pelvis. So let's call it pelvis. No, I'm not spelling it right, am I? Or maybe I am. Okay. Return focus, and now back in our player, we're gonna return focus location. And that'll be our target. Okay. And that'll help lower our pitch just a little bit. So it will help with our framing a little, and it will also just kind of make sure everything is in the right focus. We're focusing on the right parts of the character, at least for this specific one. You know, and then other characters will have different focus points. So we have this ability to kind of change that per character, per enemy, per all that stuff. All right, so this is good there. Let's give it a try. Okay. So now we're tilting down just slightly. And we can see that I'm still a bit too far away. And now, like, I'm not lining up with the that third. The third's going to be more like right around here that I want to hit. So we're going to bring the camera in, because that's still not quite where I would want to be framing the character. That length is just too much. Let's do 250. We're getting in a lot. So when you're in combat, the camera actually pulls in. The field of view actually pulls out. And we can actually tighten up that kind of bounciness of the camera a little bit if we want. But this is getting closer. It's almost, you almost need to be closer than that, though. Let's try 220. If we eject, we can do cinematic viewport and grid. Yeah, so you can see the thirds here. So then it's not bad. So it's right there. Yeah, it's a little bit off, but I'm thinking that's pretty good. You can see how we cross it a lot because the camera's a bit slow. So something we might want to add to our camera stuff is to update that. So let's do the socket as well. Let's actually raise this up slightly and see how it looks with the tilt down a little bit now. See, our camera still isn't focusing. Just the rotation. That pitch isn't where it needs to be, though. I wonder why that is. So our camera will be offset a bit from this, because our character is what we're using. what we need to do is figure out a way to, instead of doing the actor location, to do our camera. Which, if we do it this way, it might mess some things. But let's do get world location, and let's use our camera's location instead. I have a feeling that this might kind of mess with some things, though. Kind of freak out the camera sometimes. That seems to be working, actually. I was afraid it was gonna like have a weird kind of delayed effect or something. Yeah. Well, I guess here's the problem though. Our character is going to be facing this direction, just like our camera is. So the character actually doesn't face what it should face, which is the rotation of this point here to our character here. And the camera also can't quite do that. So we have to pick one or the other. Do we want the control rotation to control our character? Or do we want it to control where the camera looks? Because doing it like this means that, again, our character will, and we'll get into this kind of freaking out spot. So maybe we don't do it based on this camera. Maybe we do it based on our character. And then we mess with the camera in another way. Because right now, like if we're attacking, technically this is us facing the enemy. And it's not really correct. We might miss this attack because we're attacking over here, because that's kind of where the camera's set up. So, yeah, we do need this to be get actor location, and so setting the control rotation works kind of for us right now. Our character will rotate and face the spot correctly. So our attacks are always going to go to the right spot and everything's going to be good there. But our camera is not going to be set correctly. Our camera is going to be like always going to be wherever our character's point to this point is. So we need to do like a separate kind of camera modifier, or set the camera somehow to essentially just not use camera or the control rotation, which is interesting. I'm not sure if we're ready to do camera modifiers, but we could. I could start setting that up. Either way, we're going to leave it like this because we know our character is going to be facing the right way. Our camera isn't quite working properly. And I don't necessarily want to update the camera like every frame. I like this idea that I can, use the control rotation. So, how does this work for us? I'll have to look into it. My assumption is that the best way to do it isn't to directly update our camera. Then it might be best if we add in a camera modifier that we turn on and off when we're in combat. I don't know. I'll think about that one. Let's fix the attack animation stuff. So by default, these are kind of the montages, which are we have this full body attack, and it's pretty quick. This attack, this is 12 frames. It has a bit of a movement forward. You can you can see that the character actually moves back here, but technically they're going to be moving forward. This is a linear in and a linear out. Blend times are pretty small. The thing is that we don't have an end for it. Same thing with the attack too. They have an end here. So what I'm assuming they did originally was like a way to kind of combine them together. Like after the montage was done, like you could instantly start another one, like another attack. We do want that ability technically. There are a couple ways for us to set this up. I mean, we don't want it ever to be play the montage and then just instantly be done, like we currently have it technically. I'm actually going to turn this blend time off completely to basically 0. The blend out is going to be a problem. So let's just take a look at this real quick. Let's try slow-mo 0. Boom. So it gets to the end, but then it'll snap back. Which for us, I think we either will be doing another animation or we're going to be doing the ending. So I think it's okay. So if we do attack 1, start attack 1, end, or we can transition into another attack, like attack 2, or technically you can go back right to attack 1 if someone swipes in that same direction. Something we can do is play with that design to say, hey, if you swipe in one direction, it's actually faster to swipe back the other way. Wherever your sword is currently, it's faster to attack that way. And we can just calculate out, okay, what position is the sword in versus what you're swiping and do something cool with that. Right now, we're not going to care. It'll be all right. We're not going to do stab right now. We'll leave that for the time being. But we have an attack 1, and then this is the delay, and we have this. So when this ends, we have to decide whether or not we can do a combo and how we want that combo to set up. So we're going to say if you attack within some sort of timing window, you're able to attack again without the other thing playing, I guess. Right now, if you just swipe, you gotta get in combat. If you just swipe, there's no time. It's just, I can keep going. Like, I'll start over that attack before it even ends, technically. And we don't really want that either. So we're going to need a check to see, hey, we're in combat, so we can attack, but we also need to find out whether or not we can attack at all if we're already attacking, or if there's some other reason why we can't attack, like we're stunned or something like that, you know. So this is going to be a melee swipe attack. Or let's just call it melee swipe attack. Okay, so we do swipe attack. It triggers and we attempt an attack. We have to be in combat and we can't be attacking. And later we'll put in our other stuff. Be attacking, and this is used for everything, including like the stabbing and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So we need to say we're not attacking. And we could even group this up if we wanted.